The camera focuses on the intense face of Dr. Phil McGraw, his piercing eyes fixed on the man seated before him. The studio is plunged into a silence heavy with expectation. Michael Thompson, 45, grips a small metal box tightly in his lap, his fingers white from the pressure. Beside him, his brother James Thompson stares ahead with a pale face, while at the other end of the stage, Richard Stevens and his elderly mother, Ellen, wait anxiously. A family divided by decades of secrets, finally reunited under the relentless lights of one of America's most watched television programs. For 45 years, these two families lived separate lives, completely unaware that a devastating mistake forever altered their destinies, narrates the deep, dramatic voice that introduces the episode. Today, Dr. Phil confronts a truth that has been buried for almost half a century. When a man brings in a sealed safe that may contain definitive proof that he was switched at birth, what happens next is so shocking that it makes Dr. Phil interrupt the recording for the first time in over 20 years of the program. The spotlights intensify, the dramatic music swells, and the camera pulls back to reveal the entire studio, with the audience on the edge of their seats, all waiting for the moment that promises to shake the foundations of two American families. Before we continue with this impactful story, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of Dr. Phil's upcoming revelations. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what you think will happen in this case. Your opinion is very important for us to continue bringing you this exclusive content that transforms lives. Tension fills the studio air as the camera pans across the faces of the guests. Michael Thompson, a tormented-looking man with deep dark circles under his eyes and prematurely gray hair, clutches the metal safe to his chest as if his life depended on it. Beside him, James Thompson, physically different with darker hair and distinct features, keeps his arms crossed defensively. Across the stage, Richard Stevens, a man of the same age with a strikingly similar build to James, holds the hand of his elderly mother, Ellen, who was visibly trembling under the studio lights. Dr. Phil leans forward in his chair, his eyes fixed on Michael. So, Michael, you're telling us that for 45 years you lived as James's brother, but now you believe it was all a lie? Dr. Phil's voice echoes through the silent studio as the camera captures the trembling in Michael's hands. Michael takes a deep breath, his eyes already welling up with tears. Dr. Phil, 6 months ago I was diagnosed with a rare kidney condition. The doctor said it was genetic and asked about my family's medical history. When I spoke to James, I found out he never had any similar problems. His voice falters momentarily. But the strangest thing happened when I met Richard by chance at a nephrologist appointment. He was there for the same problem as me. The camera cuts to Richard, who nods slowly in confirmation. His face reflects a mixture of confusion and fear. And what made you suspect there might have been a mix-up at the maternity ward? Dr. Phil asks, his tone firm but compassionate. Michael looks at James, then at Richard. When I started investigating, I discovered that we were all born in the same hospital, on the same day. 3 male babies. James and I aren't identical twins. We were always told we were fraternal twins, which explained our physical differences. And the hospital, Riverside Memorial, had a severe fire in 1980 that destroyed many records from that time. Michael pauses, his breathing uneven. Dr. Phil, I grew up believing James was my twin brother, but I always felt like an outsider in my own family. I never looked like anyone but my mother. And now, looking at Richard, it's like looking at someone from my own family. Dr. Phil turns to James, whose face now reflects a mixture of anger and disbelief. James, from what I understand, you don't believe your brother's suspicions. Why? James straightens up in his chair, visibly irritated. Because this is absurd, Dr. Phil. Michael and I have grown up together since we were born. Although we're not identical, we share many things. We have the same allergies. We were raised like brothers. His voice rises, echoing through the studio. And now, because of a medical coincidence, he wants to destroy our family. Our mother died just 2 years ago. She's not here to defend herself against these accusations. Ellen Stevens, who had been silent until then, suddenly intervenes, her voice frail but determined. Drive off, Phil. I've remained silent for so long, but I can't anymore. All eyes turn to the white-haired woman, whose hand now grips her son's with renewed strength. I always had doubts about Richard. He never resembled his father or any of us. But my husband, he wouldn't let me talk about it. He said it was a blessing, that it didn't matter. Richard stares at his mother in shock. Mom, what are you saying? The studio lights seem to intensify, the tension palpable as Dr. Phil looks directly at the camera, his expression grave. When we return, Michael will open the safe that he says contains the ultimate proof that could forever change the lives of these two families. After the commercial break, the studio seems even more tense. Dr. Phil remains seated, his gaze shifting between the four guests. The metal safe now rests on the table between them, an almost tangible presence of secrets yet to be revealed. Ellen, Dr. Phil addressed the elderly woman, his voice gentle but firm. You were about to tell us something important about Richard's birth. What happened that day at the hospital? Ellen looks at her own hands, wrinkled with age, before raising her gaze to meet Dr. Phil's eyes. It was June 15, 1980. I gave birth after a difficult labor. They heavily sedated me, and when I woke up, they brought me a baby. My husband was so happy. She pauses, taking a deep breath. But something was wrong. On the second day, a nurse came to check on the baby and got confused by the notes. She said something about misidentification and hurried out. Hours later, the hospital director showed up with a lawyer. They assured her that everything was resolved, that there had only been an administrative error. Richard turns to his mother, incredulous. And you never told me this? You never questioned it? Ellen begins to cry silently. Your father made me promise never to mention this. He was afraid they might take you away. We already loved you so much. Richard, Dr. Phil turns to Michael. And your parents never mentioned anything unusual about your birth? Michael shakes his head. Not directly, but after our mother died, I found her diary. There were disturbing entries, talking about how strange it was that, despite being fraternal twins, James and I had such different personalities and health. She wrote that she felt as if I were, his voice falters momentarily, as if I were from another family. James stands up abruptly. That's ridiculous. Our mother loved us equally. You're twisting her words because you're obsessed with this crazy theory, Doctor. Phil raises his hand, silencing James. You're all emotionally invested in this situation, and that's understandable. But we're here to uncover the truth. He turns to Michael. You mentioned you have evidence in this safe. What exactly does it contain? Michael places his hands on the metal safe. When I found our mother's diary, I started investigating. I contacted former hospital staff. A retired nurse, Margaret Wilson, told me there was great chaos that day. 3 babies were born within a 2-hour period, including a pair of fraternal twins who were supposedly me and James. And there was a maternity emergency that diverted the staff's attention. He takes a deep breath. Margaret had kept some things from that time out of remorse, I think. She gave me the safe 2 weeks ago. On her deathbed, the camera captures Dr. Phil's face, which now shows clear signs of distress. And have you opened this safe yet? No. Michael replies, his voice almost a whisper. I promised Margaret I would only open it in the presence of everyone involved. She wanted the truth revealed once and for all, but she also wanted to give everyone a chance to process it together. Phil looks at James, then at Richard and Ellen. Are you all prepared for what might be inside this safe? Because once this lid is open, there's no going back. A heavy silence fills the studio. Finally, Richard speaks, his voice strangely calm. I need to know, Phil. All my life I felt like something was missing, like I didn't fully belong to my family, despite all the love I received. James, still standing, crosses his arms. This is madness. But go ahead, open that damn safe so we can end this charade, Doctor. Phil turns to the audience, his face serious. When we return, Michael will open the safe and reveal what may be one of the most shocking pieces of evidence we've ever seen on this show. The studio lights dim slightly, creating a dramatic focus on the central table where the metal safe rests. The tense music gradually increases as the camera zooms in on the participants' tense faces. Michael Thompson breathes deeply, his hands visibly trembling as he approaches the safe. James remains standing a few steps behind, his body rigid with contained tension. Richard and Ellen Stevens sit side by side, their hands intertwined in an unconscious gesture of mutual support. Phil looks directly at Michael. The time has come, Michael. Open the safe and let's find out what Margaret Wilson wanted you all to know. With trembling fingers, Michael inserts a small key into the safe's lock. The metallic click echoes through the silent studio like a gunshot. Slowly, he lifts the lid. The camera pans to capture the moment from multiple angles, including a close-up of the safe's contents. Inside, neatly arranged, are several items: 3 hospital identification bracelets for newborns, yellowed with age, a sealed brown envelope, and a small notebook with a worn cover. Michael first removes the identification bracelets. These are the original bracelets of the 3 babies born that day. He places them on the table, one by one. This one has the name Thompson, baby A. This one says Thompson, baby B. And this one, he pauses significantly, says Stevens, baby a doctor. Phil examines the bracelets, his face a mask of concentration. And what else do we have here? Michael opens his notebook. This is Margaret Wilson's personal diary. She documented the chaos of that day. He flips through a few pages and begins to read. June 15, 1980. Most chaotic shift of my career. Fire in the supply room caused a partial evacuation. The 3 newborn males were temporarily transferred to the pediatric ward. When they returned to the maternity ward, I noticed that the identifications of 2 babies seemed to be switched, but Dr. Harris insisted everything was correct. I have no authority to question it, but something is wrong. The camera captures Ellen Stevens' expression as she brings her hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. Richard remains motionless, as if in shock. James approaches, leaning over to look at the diary. What does this prove? It's just a nurse's suspicions. There's no concrete evidence. Michael then retrieves the brown envelope from the safe. Margaret had kept hair samples and small swabs with buccal cells from each baby that day died secretly. She said she always knew that one day the truth would need to come out. She worked in genetic research before becoming a nurse and knew the importance of preserving these samples correctly. He opens the envelope and takes out 3 small, hermetically sealed plastic bags, each containing a few strands of hair and swabs preserved in a special solution, all identified with the same names as the bracelets. 2 weeks ago, I sent these samples to a laboratory specializing in ancient DNA, which can extract genetic material even from samples decades old, using advanced amplification techniques. Phil frowns. Without the consent of those involved, I needed to know. Phil. Michael pulls one last folded piece of paper from the envelope. These are the results. Absolute silence fills the studio as Michael unfolds the paper. His voice trembles as he reads. Conclusion: the sample identified as Thompson, baby B, has a genetic match with the current sample of Richard Stevens. The sample identified as Stevens, baby A, has a genetic match with the current sample of Michael Thompson. The sample identified as Thompson, baby A, genetically matches James Thompson. The camera captures the expression of utter shock on Dr. Phil's face. James falls heavily into his chair, his face suddenly pale. Richard rises, staggering, as if he had been physically struck. That means, Dr. Phil begins, his voice strangely altered. That means I'm not James' biological brother, Michael says, tears now streaming freely down his face. I'm the biological son of the Stevens, and Richard is James' true fraternal twin brother, the other Thompson baby. Ellen Stevens lets out a muffled cry and stands up, hesitantly approaching Michael. I always felt. Something told me something was wrong. Her voice falters completely as she extends her trembling hand toward Michael. Richard remains paralyzed, staring at James as if seeing him for the first time. The resemblance between them, previously unnoticed, now seems striking. The same face shape, the same eyebrow pattern, subtle details that only now make sense. Suddenly, Dr. Phil does something completely unexpected. He stands up abruptly, tears visible in his eyes. Stop the recording, he orders, his voice choked with emotion. Stop now. The audience whispers in shock. The cameras keep rolling, capturing the extraordinary moment when Dr. Phil, visibly emotional, turns to the off-screen director. I told you to stop filming. He turns to the guests, a glint of tears now clearly visible on his face. This revelation, we need to give these people a moment. No cameras, no audience. They need to process this in private. The camera continues rolling as the production crew gets to work. Dr. Phil discreetly wipes a tear from his face, something almost never seen in his more than 20 years on the show. 15 minutes later, the cameras start rolling again, but the scene has changed drastically. The audience has been removed from the studio, and only a minimal crew remains. Dr. Phil is seated with the 4 guests in a more intimate setting. All show signs of having cried, their faces etched with the intense emotion they have just experienced. What you just witnessed is something we've never done before on this show. narrates the deep voice. Dr. Phil, for the first time in his television career, ordered the cameras to be turned off to give this broken family a moment of privacy. What happened during those 15 minutes fundamentally changed the dynamic between these four people. Dr. Phil looks directly at the camera, his composure restored, but his eyes still revealing the depth of his emotion. I decided to stop recording because there are times when television needs to take a step back and respect the humanity of the people involved. What Michael, James, Richard, and Ellen are facing is a complete disruption of their identities and family histories. He turns to the guests. You agreed to continue this conversation on camera because you believe your story can help other families. For that reason, I want to thank you all for your courage. The camera focuses on Ellen, who is now seated between Michael and Richard, holding both their hands. Her face shows a complex mixture of grief and a new kind of hope. During our break, Dr. Phil continued, James revealed something to us that no one knew, something that adds an even deeper layer to this already extraordinary story. James, visibly calmer now, nods slowly. When Michael started this investigation about the hospital, I thought it was madness. But there was something I never told anyone, not even Michael. He takes a deep breath. Our father, in his last days, when he was dying of cancer, he called me to his bedside when he was alone. He gripped my arm tightly and said, James, there's something I need to confess. About the day you were born, there was an incident at the hospital, a mistake. But I did what any father would do to protect his family. James pauses, swallowing hard. He died the next morning, before I could ask more. I never told anyone because I thought it was just the delirium of a dying man. Michael looks at his foster brother with newfound understanding. So you knew. Somehow, you knew there might be truth in what I've discovered. I didn't want to know, James admits, his voice breaking. Because if it were true, it would mean that my whole life, everything I believed about my identity and my family, it would all be a lie. Dr. Phil leans forward. It's not a lie, James. It's a complicated story, but the love your parents had for you and Michael was real. They raised you both as their own children. Ellen, with the wisdom of her years, then speaks. We were all victims of a terrible mistake, but also of decisions made by people who thought they were protecting those they loved. She shakes Michael's hand. Richard always had our love, just as you always have the love of the Thompsons. Blood matters, yes, but the family we built also matters. Richard, who had remained silent, finally speaks. Dr. Phil, in those 15 minutes, when the cameras were off, something strange happened between me and James. He looks at the man he just discovered to be his biological brother. It was as if a puzzle finally fell into place. We started noticing so many similarities, mannerisms that we shared without ever having met. James agrees. It's both frightening and comforting at the same time, like finding a piece of myself that I didn't even know was missing. Dr. Phil observes the four with a compassionate gaze. What you have discovered today will forever change your lives. The question now is, how do you choose to go from here? As a family separated by a past mistake, or as one larger family united by the truth? Michael looks at Ellen, the mother he never knew. I lost my adoptive mother 2 years ago. Finding out I have another mother who's still alive I can't even express how I feel. Ellen, with tears in her eyes, smiles at Michael. I always felt like there was a piece of me missing from the world. And now I know that piece was you. The camera captures this intimate moment as Dr. Phil announces, when we return, these two families will discuss how they intend to move forward with this new reality, and I will share why this case has affected me so deeply. The studio lights are now softer, creating an atmosphere of intimacy and reflection. Dr. Phil is standing, while the four guests are gathered in a semicircle, their chairs closer together than at the beginning of the program. The transformation in their body postures and facial expressions is remarkable. Where before there was tension and distrust, now there is a nascent connection, still fragile, but undeniably present. In all my years helping families face crises and difficult revelations, few cases have touched me as deeply as this one, narrates the deep voice, while the camera shows a montage of emotional moments from the episode. The families, separated by a tragic mistake, now face the challenge of redefining what it means to be a family. Dr. Phil walks slowly through the studio, his face etched with the emotion of the day. In the last few hours, we have witnessed something extraordinary. Michael, James, Richard, and Ellen have discovered a truth that has shaken the foundations of their identities. But we have also witnessed something beautiful, the human capacity for adaptation, forgiveness, and the expansion of the family circle. He turns to the guests. You made some important decisions during our break. Would you like to share them with our viewers? Richard smiles slightly, the first genuine smile of the day. We decided it doesn't make sense to think in terms of my family versus your family. From now on, we're an extended family. James and I will spend time together, getting to know each other as biological brothers. Michael and my mother have 45 years of stories to share. He looks at Michael, and Michael and I decided that, although we aren't biologically brothers, we grew up as children of the same parents, just in different homes. There's a bond there too. Ellen, whose face now looks lighter despite the dried tears, adds, my husband passed away 10 years ago. He never knew the whole truth, but deep down, I think he suspected. He loved Richard with all his heart, and I know he would be happy to know that our family has just grown, not been divided. James, still visibly processing everything, nods. Our parents, the Thompsons, raised us to be men of character. They're no longer here to explain their choices, but I'm sure they did what they believed was best for all of us. I can't judge them for it. Michael, whose face now seems transformed by the peace he has finally found, looks at everyone around him. All my life, I felt like I was searching for something I couldn't find. Now, I understand that I was searching for these connections, this truth. I still love the parents who raised me, and I will always be a Thompson in many ways. But I am also a Stevens. I am both, Doctor. Phil observes this exchange with evident emotion. He then turns to the camera, his expression solemn. What made me stop recording today, for the first time in my career, was the recognition of something profoundly human happening before my eyes. I saw for people confronting a devastating truth that could destroy them or transform them, and I chose to give them the private space to process that transformation. He walks to the center of the studio, his presence commanding everyone's attention. Families are built in many ways. By blood, yes. By upbringing, certainly. But mostly by love, choice, and daily commitment. What Michael, James, Richard, and Ellen taught us today is that when the truth finally comes out, it can be liberating, even when it's painful. Phil paused, his voice deepening. I grew up in a family with its own secrets and complications. Perhaps that's why this case touched me so deeply. I saw in these for individuals the courage that many families never find, the courage to face the truth, however inconvenient or painful it may be. He approaches the guests again. What happened in that hospital in 1980 was a tragic mistake. What happened in the following 4 to 5 years was a complex mix of love, protection, and, yes, deception. But what is happening now, before our very eyes, is redemption. The camera zooms in on each face, capturing pure, unfiltered emotion. When I ordered the cameras to be turned off, it wasn't just to give these people privacy. It was because I understood, at that moment, that some human transformations are so sacred that we simply need to witness them, not exploit them. And I wanted all of us, the crew, the audience, and now you, our viewers, to remember that behind every dramatic story we present are real human beings, whose lives will continue long after the studio lights go out. Phil looks directly into the camera, his face reflecting an intensity rare even for him. Families are complicated. Truths can remain buried for decades. But what matters, in the end, is not the blood that runs in their veins, but the love that runs in their hearts. Michael, James, Richard, and Ellen are just beginning their journey as a new extended family. There will be challenges, moments of doubt, perhaps even resentment. But they have taken the first and most important step. They have chosen truth over comfort, connection over division. He turns one last time to the 4 of them, who are now standing, united in an impromptu circle of mutual support. You reminded me today why I started this program over 20 years ago. Because I believe in the transformative power of truth, and because I believe that, even in the most extraordinary and painful circumstances, human beings have the capacity to grow, forgive, and redefine what it means to be a family. Soft music begins to play as the camera slowly pulls back, capturing the final image for people, once strangers divided by a secret, now united by the truth, while Dr. Phil, visibly emotional but professionally composed, observes the new family with the gaze of a man who has just witnessed the best of human nature. Sometimes in life, the narrator's voice concludes as the screen fades to black. The truth can be the most painful and liberating gift we can receive. For the Thompson-Stevens family, the sealed safe contained not only evidence of a past mistake, but also the seeds for a new beginning.